All right, guys, in today's video, we have to take some time to talk about this specific topic once again. It has to do with cross-gen games and how cross-gen games, as in games that release on both the next-gen consoles as well as the current-gen consoles, will be held back possibly to a significant degree. Now, this conversation has always been touchy for some people because we know that Microsoft has come out and let us know that for the first year, maybe even 2 years of their next-gen Xbox console being on the market, they're still going to release all of their first-party titles on the original Xbox One. And I've always said that I think this is a huge mistake because it just didn't sound right to me. I mean, I understand that it's pro-consumer for those who do not want to upgrade to the next-gen console and just want to stay where they're at. They can still have access to these games. I can even understand how that helps Microsoft specifically because of the direction they're going in with Game Pass and trying to be on every device. But I've always said that I don't think this is actually a good thing for the games themselves. The reason being is just using my common sense here, not even having to be a developer or look too deeply into it. It just always seemed hard for me to believe that if a developer was trying to make a game for the new consoles with cutting edge technology in them, right, in 2020, that there would be no reduction in that game whatsoever other than just resolution and frame rate, right? Like there would be no drawbacks other than that if they were also to make that same game run or try to get that same game to run on these 2013 consoles with way outdated Jaguar CPU cores. And I've gotten, believe it or not, a decent amount of pushback against this because apparently I'm wrong. It's all about scalability, and because scalability is better than it ever has been, this isn't something we have to worry about. And I've always, no matter what people try to throw my way, I've never believed it because it just doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up. I mean, if you were talking about a console that came out like 2 or 3 years ago, maybe that makes sense. But you're talking about something that came out in 2013, and when you understand just how outdated these Jaguar CPU cores are, you know that this is just not ideal for game development going into next gen. It's just not. It's just not. And so what am I talking about here? Well, we have some interesting information coming from a former DICE engineer as well as Digital Foundry's John Linneman, letting us know that turns out trying to make cross-gen games is not something that developers want to do, and they're not enjoying it at all. And it's actually, I believe John Linneman is even calling it painful for them. So does it seem Sony was actually right to believe in generations and decide that PlayStation 5 exclusives are actually going to be exclusive to the PlayStation 5? I've always believed in that, but this is just further proof that Sony made the right call once again. So let's go over this, shall we? It says here, developers are having a rather hard time scaling back cross-gen PS5 and Xbox Series X titles to the original PlayStation 4 and Xbox One hardware. At least that's what Digital Foundry's John Linneman is saying on his Twitter. According to Linneman, plenty of developers have confirmed that scaling their upcoming cross-gen titles back to the base current-gen hardware is rather painful. It's a painful process. As a matter of fact, Linneman states that developers just don't want to develop titles for the now underpowered AMD Jaguar CPU inside the base models of Sony's PlayStation 4 and Microsoft's Xbox One, which both launched in 2013. And so this is what he's quoted with saying, nobody wants to develop for an underpowered Jaguar CPU any longer. When talking about the absence of the next-gen exclusives, he says, I've spoken with enough developers to know how painful the process is at this point. Leave the Xbox One and PS4 behind. Now, let's be real here, guys. Who is he talking to? Now, granted, he's not just talking to Microsoft. He's also talking to a lot of the third-party publishers who are also making third-party games. However, it's always been a little bit more understandable why third-party publishers would opt to make cross-gen games, but I don't think it's ever been very understandable, in my opinion, why Microsoft is. So to me, this seems more directed towards Microsoft than anybody else. But, you know, I could see how it's also applicable to third-party publishers as well. And he also said this, and I found this interesting. I actually retweeted this on my Twitter. He said, "One weird thing I've noticed lately is an aversion of next-gen exclusives, as if launching a game exclusively for a next-gen machine is anti-consumer. This is how it's worked before. Mario 64 did not exist on Super NES, and it was a great thing." And I have to agree with him 100% there. Okay, I've always said that I think Sony really is doing it right, as well as Nintendo. But specifically with the PlayStation 5, I think it's just more of a relevant console to kind of focus on, because a lot of people were under the belief before Sony came out and confirmed it that their exclusives for the first year were also going to be cross-gen. And I'm glad they are not. But we also have a former software engineer, Embark programmer and former software engineer at EA DICE, Lisa S is what I will call her, because I do not want to butcher this individual's name, also chimed in on the matter and confirmed that developing games for several targets is rather hard indeed. According to the programmer, making titles work on both the current and next generation consoles requires a lot of work. Building and certifying games for a bunch of targets is hard, regardless of hardware utilization, she wrote. Compatibility issues in SDKs and other tooling are a thing, as are staffing and infrastructure limitations. This isn't a matter of clicking an extra button to support 10 platforms versus 9. So, yeah, I mean, look, even just going off of this quote, it seems to me what this engineer, this software engineer is trying to stress is that it's not easy. And this is where you have to be really careful about who you listen to and the way they're speaking on the internet, because there are individuals on the internet with a large platform, and I understand that I'm guilty of this occasionally too, but I always try to know my limits and make it clear, right? I have always found it really strange when I've heard individuals with large platforms who are not developers speaking as if they are developers, and they know just how easy or difficult it may or may not be to make games cross-gen. They speak as if they have first-hand experience making cross-gen games, and because of this, they know how easy it is, and they're saying that it's no problem. I've always thought that that was really bizarre. What's even more bizarre is how people seemingly would just listen to that and say, yeah, okay, that makes sense, when in reality, it doesn't make sense. Nothing is ever as easy as that, right? And you have a developer here literally clarifying this, not just John Linneman, but an actual software engineer saying, yeah, it's never as easy as just clicking an extra button and allowing it to work on another platform. It just doesn't work like that, okay? Regardless of how, how much better scalability has gotten, it's never that easy, right? So it goes on to say, over the past few months, there have been several reports about the current gen consoles holding back the upcoming next gen consoles. Xbox head Phil Spencer, however, stated that this isn't the case with the Xbox. And so I'm not going to reiterate this quote from Phil Spencer because we already went over it. And I'm just mentioning that because Phil Spencer is one of these people, that he's claiming that these games aren't going to be held back. I want it to be known that Phil Spencer made this comment like right before we saw Halo Infinite. So it really just seemed like he ended up putting his foot in his mouth. And Halo Infinite, I think, looks the way it does for a multitude of reasons. I'm not saying it's just because it's a cross-gen game, but let's be honest. In that moment, anybody like myself or anybody else who was skeptical about the idea of all their games being cross-gen because we were afraid they were going to be held back and not reach their full potential, we were all validated in that moment. And now we have further validation where we have John Linneman from Digital Foundry, who I believe no doubt has contacts with, individuals across the industry, developers. I'm sure he does talk to many developers, and he's coming out here. He's not naming names or being specific for obvious reasons, but he's saying he's talked to enough of them to know that this is, and he's calling it a painful process for developers, a painful process that Sony is not making their developers go through. Luckily, thankfully, and I think we're going to see that. I think we're already seeing that. Just look at that screenshot from Spider-Man Miles Morales that was released yesterday and compare it to a screenshot from Spider-Man PS4. It's a next-gen leap. Okay, and this is where I'm going to push back. I am going to get a little bit more aggressive and let people know who need to hear it that Spider-Man is not just DLC. It's not just a game that can easily run on the PS4. That's not how this works. And I don't need to be a developer to know that, because what I know about being a developer, based off of what I've heard developers say, is it's hard and it's not easy. And nothing is ever as easy as it seems. And to assume it is, especially when you are not actually a developer, is a very arrogant and frankly ignorant thing to do. And I've never been one to do that, okay? I've always known it was hard. However, that does not mean games should be, they should be locked off from criticism. I'm not saying that. Sometimes we do need to be, we need to be harsh and we need to be real. And we need to let developers know this, from a consumer standpoint, this isn't acceptable. Perfect example, Halo Infinite. But at the same time, I'm not going to be the type of person that's going to sit here and assume that, oh, well, I heard that scalability is easier than ever has been. And Phil Spencer's saying we're not going to see any difference. So yeah, developers should have no problem making cross-gen games. When in reality, it seems behind the scenes, they're out here basically saying this is terrible. This is the worst. This is painful. I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole Resident Evil 8 thing again with that Dusk Golem individual. In fact, I don't think I'll ever be mentioning him again on this channel other than right now. But I do want to mention one thing that I believe it was this person who said it. And again, we don't know if it's to be believed, but either way, this is what we've been hearing about Resident Evil 8 is that apparently there had been a lot of issues, or Capcom and their developers are having a lot of issues making Resident Evil 8 cross-gen. And so what they decided to do was just scrap the current gen versions and just focus on next gen. I know we just recently went over the rumors about how, this Dust Golem individual saying that Resident Evil 8 is struggling to hit 1080p 60 frames per second on the PS5. I guarantee you he replaced the PS4 Pro with the PS5. Why he would do that, I don't know. Maybe he was just trying to start controversy and start problems and spread these false rumors. But it just, it's just a weird situation, because that is something we have heard, is that apparently Resident Evil 8 was targeting to be cross-gen, but it got scrapped because they just couldn't make it happen, right? And so if you told me that the Resident Evil 8 version that they're also trying to make for the PS5 and the Series X, it's struggling to hit 1080p 60 FPS on the PS4 Pro as well as the Xbox One X potentially, I would believe that, because it's a cross-gen game. I could imagine them running into that type of problem. It sounds very plausible, especially with what these individuals are saying. So I know I'm getting a little bit heated. I know I'm being a little bit ranty right now, but I can't help it, because this is just a big topic of discussion that we've had time and time again here on the channel, where people say, oh, you're all about the console wars. It's not about the console war. It's about listening to what other people are saying, me completely disagreeing with it, and then offering my reasons as to why I disagree with it and why I see things another way. And it becomes incredibly important, in my opinion, to highlight the individuals and the things that are being said by people who would know more than me, or more than anybody else really who's not a developer, what the real truth is. And the real truth is here, cross-gen game development is holding back games, and it will hold back games, not just for Microsoft, but for any third-party publisher. So the sooner we jump onto the next-gen bandwagon and just leave the past behind, leave the PS4 and leave the Xbox One behind, the better it's going to be for games, and the better the future will be of game development, in my opinion. So I definitely had to take time to go over this with you guys. I'm going to end the video here before it gets too long. So let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. Leave the video a like if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and haven't already. Hit the bell notification icon so you never miss an upload. And feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.